Welcome to Racism is Real, where we tackle the urgent realities of racism in our society. In this series, we explore the systems of oppression that continue to harm marginalized communities and the movements working to create change. Through powerful conversations with activists, educators, and thought leaders, we aim to uncover the truth and take steps towards justice.
Welcome to the Racism is Real series. Today we have joining us Kyle Sullivan and Tanya Fuel, aka Aunt Tanya. Please introduce yourselves.
Go ahead, Antanya.
All right. My name is Tanya Fuel, aka Aunt Tanya, and I am the director of Roots of Justice, a nonprofit organization that really works for anti-racist and anti-oppression systems in America and beyond. And I am excited to be here today for this topic.
Thanks, Antanya. I'm don't call me Uncle Kyle. That would be strange. I'm Kyle Sullivan. I am coming to you from Haudenosaunee land in Western New York. I am a professor of human development and mental health counseling and also a trainer with Roots of Justice. Most of my work is centered around anti-oppression in all of its forms towards the liberatory end of flourishing lives for all beings. So that's kind of what my research is in, but I do a whole bunch of other things too. So you can follow some of these links that are down below if you're interested.
All right, great, thank you. And I am your host, London Gray Harris. I am a recent graduate, class of 2024. I obtained my degree in accounting, and I currently work for PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, as a consultant associate. I work within our advisory sector and the enterprise risk control solutions. And today we are diving into the topic of the wealth gap, race and economic inequality. Let's get into it. All right, I'm gonna start with the first question. What are key factors contributing to the racial wealth gap in America? Kyle?
Well, I think first what's important to acknowledge is that there is a racial wealth gap, that when we're talking about wealth, we should probably define our terms. And so what we're talking about with wealth is both material, but can also be social. And so what we're talking about is median incomes. We're talking about the possession and ownership of property, about being business owners, about having equity in stocks and bonds. But we're also talking about social access. And so we're all moving through life in context, and we have larger and larger circles of context that we step into, and we are connected socially. And so we're talking about the gap, not just fiscally, but also in some of these other areas around health, the average age of death. We're talking about the propensity for particular races to die from particular diseases, right? And when we're talking about race, correlation is not causation. And so we are not saying that race is the cause of any of these things, but we're trying to understand why it's correlated. So what are the root causes here? And so in America, and I think in all of I think we could probably attribute it to the larger world, or the context that I'm situated in, is situated in a historical and social context that has systematically liberated some and oppressed others. And so in America, when did we come here? We meaning the white people who look like me, pale, pasty white. When did we come here, and why? Right? And what allowed white folk to colonize and take over land? More importantly, what allowed us to see the land as something that can be occupied and owned, right? So these are different types of worldviews that come into collision with one another. And then we take these worldviews and we put law and policy around them in order to enforce them. And what we know about human supremacy, so this idea that the human is more superior to every other species, to the earth itself, is that we naturally create hierarchy in order to hoard particular resources. And so in order to hoard particular resources, we have to create these hierarchies, these distinctions between peoples in order to take advantage of them. We have to make some people less human in order to take advantage of their resources, which is what happened in America. So I don't know. I think that's maybe a good place to start. What do you think, Tanya?
I love that, because I was going to even talk to the same point that you're saying of the historical context, right? The key factors come from the history that was established in America and a lot of the facts that you already gave, but even leading into further times of the disparity of housing, the disparity of land ownership, the trades that happened even before America was colonized represented that there was a richness in the land, and there was not, I won't even say equity because that's probably not the best word for it, but there was a way that it was accounted for, that there was wealth and there were hierarchies of goodness on both sides. But then colonization happened, which introduced then supremacy culture to America. And then it started to show that if I want to rule, if I want to conquer this land, then there needs to be a hierarchy, a true hierarchy. And then we start seeing that as I'm building a hierarchy, there's a division. We're no longer on the same playing field. We're now different. So the gap isn't across the line, the gap is high and low. And I think that the factors that contribute to that are the historical context. There is this idea that society wants to, people in power want to hold on to power. And if they feel like they're losing power, it's almost as though they feel as though they're being harmed because it was something that's so a part of them. And so that fear, that power, that historical context, and the belief that in order for me to do well, in order for me to succeed, someone else must be doing bad. Someone else must be lower. Someone else must be inferior in order for me to achieve. And I think that's what America has really bought into in order to see the great gap of where we are.
Yeah, I really appreciate the, like, if we're going to talk root cause, we're talking about a, a, a worldview that is set in duality, right? That there's a lack of resource for everybody. And in order for me to survive, for me to actualize in the world, I have to have access to excess, right? That is a key component of supremacy culture, is that I have access to excess. But it also is in this materiality, that it's not just about, or that it is more about what I can accumulate in the material realm than what I am cultivating necessarily in the other dimensions of what it means to be human. And so that's in the physical realm, but it's also in the intellectual, the emotional, and the spiritual domains of being human. And so we cast ourselves off. We cast these like higher capacities off in order to accumulate wealth. And in order to do that, we have to create these distinctions between peoples.
Yeah. I was having a conversation with a group at my church. I'm here in Gainesville, Florida, and we were just talking about the demographics of the community around us. And in Gainesville, Florida, 20% of the population holds the highest jobs, the highest, those are the upper income. Those are the ones that the entire city is working to cater. And the other 80 it's that drastic, is considered low income. And so having those disparities, they come from this idea of what are we catering to? So I'm in Gainesville, Florida, the University of Florida. We're catering to this school, even though there are people who are rooted in this community, who've lived here, who are the locals of the community, but they're seen as they can work the jobs for the people that they're serving. But even in what the affordable housing around here, they cannot afford the housing that is around the area in which they're working these jobs. And that's a big gap. And it's a lot of times deeply rooted in race.
Mm-hmm. And so just to give some us white people, we like our statistics because it gives us a handle to hold on to, something more practical, intellectual, rational, is what there's the emphasis there. But white folk, the median household income in December 2021 for white folk in America is $250,000. Okay, median income, $250,000. The racial disparity, I want you to really hear this number. The median income in December 2021, according to Pew Research, for Black folk is $27,000.
Wow.
Okay, 27,000 in comparison to 250,000. An important distinction to make here is that the Asian community or Asian folk in America, their median household income is $321,000. Okay, what do we attribute this to? This is something that a lot of folk would say, well, it can't be about race because Asian people have higher income than white folk. Okay, so we have to situate ourselves into a context. What is happening socially and historically that's allowing for access to this type of income? Mm-hmm. And it is access to education. So the Asian community in America is typically highly educated. Why is that the case? A lot of immigrant communities, a lot of wealth that's coming in from other Asian countries, but also a lot of immigrants that are going to school, that are able to make their way into the education system and to find higher jobs. We're finding this in the political conversation right now about how there was just this whole thing with Elon Musk and the Conservative Party about H-1B visa workers, right? So we're trying to fill key engineering jobs with immigrants, and so these are higher paying jobs because they require higher levels of education, and there's access to that in the Asian community. But what is the story with the Black or Latino community, where the Hispanic community is $48,000 in a year? What's actually happening there? Is it attributed to race? Is it a race thing? Is it because Black and Latino folk are inferior in some way? Absolutely not. It's because there are systemic barriers that have prevented access to systems that allow for wealth to accumulate. How does wealth accumulate in America? Through working, through access to jobs that pay well. Jobs that pay well, what we've been told, at least, we're learning that this isn't always the case, that jobs that pay well require a certain level of education and a certain level of experience. We also know that to get particular jobs, you have to be in relationship with the right people, that most hires don't happen because I turned in a CV or a resume. They happen because of the relationships that I have with people who have access to power to grant jobs. Mm-hmm. How else does wealth accumulate? By owning property, by owning houses. Mm-hmm. How have historically marginalized people been kept out of that? We know of policies of Jim Crow and redlining, and these are just instances that you can look in just those things and you can see the heinous ways that power tries to galvanize itself over and against others, because we're trying to accumulate for a select few and take that access to excess away from the rest of the population. So those are just a few things that we can maybe dive into.
That's great.
Thank you guys. Yeah, great. We do have a comment in the comment section. What would it look like if we could reverse this duality?
Mm-hmm. What would it look like, right? I think that's
I can take a stab at that.
Yeah, please do, London.
Just a quick example, because when you were talking earlier about you know, getting these jobs and networking and knowing the right people to get these higher positions, it reminded me of a friend of mine. And she was very blessed. I'll tell you that. Coming into college, she first year had an apartment, her car on campus. I said, "Girl, you're doing it right." But she had parents who pushed her to be there, Black parents who pushed her to be there. So her father is a doctor, and her brother want to be doctors. And her first internship, she got work at the same hospital as her dad. And I was like, wow, that's, a great opportunity, knowing that, your dad is the one who got you there. Now, some people may view that as like a negative, but I feel like in our community, that's a positive. We want to uplift our community. We want to put the right people in these positions so we can elevate our Black community as a whole and be in those higher positions and take care of Black people. You know what I'm saying? So that was just an example that I thought of.
That's a great example, London, because a lot of times people don't realize that in order to change a system, it doesn't take just one silo of somebody. It takes allies, it takes resources, it takes working together. So women's rights didn't change just because women said, let's change the rights. It took women and men working together. Blacks and civil rights didn't change because we said, hey, things should change. It took allies across the board. So exactly what you're saying, when we as people of color have an opportunity, it is almost um, a duty of ours to make sure that we are also putting into place and grooming great talent in order to step up in those spaces for people that wouldn't typically have those same opportunities. And likewise, for white allies, it's important that they give opportunities. I've heard of several opportunities where coaches, where different business people in hierarchy of corporate America, they intentionally decide that they will focus on uplifting a certain community in order to ensure that they have the skills, they have the talent, they have the resources, but they also have the opportunity.
Right.
A couple of things come to mind. For me, as a human developmentalist, I think about systems, period, and I talk about what are systems serving? To what end is a particular system serving? So, to what end does the racial wealth gap serve? What are we trying to do with what is actually accomplishing? What system is being served? And in trying to reverse that, or what does this duality look like if we were trying to reverse this? It means that we have to have an imagination that is not entrenched in the current systems we have, because the current systems want to perpetuate themselves. And what do the current systems we have perpetuate? Access to excess for a very select few, the illusion to access to excess for a large majority, and then everybody is in service to that capital, right? An organization is duty bound to their shareholders to give them shareholder access, right? What are those shareholders doing? Nothing. They're not working. They're not contributing in any way. I have stocks, right? I'm not doing anything to help my Apple stock grow. I'm just gathering excess by doing nothing. So what are we actually serving? We're serving the access, the cumulative advantage to do whatever we want without having to do much at all, right? And so we're reserving that for a select few in society, and then everybody else serves that purpose. So what we have to do is recognize and name the system that's at play. That is late stage capitalism to a T. That's what we're experiencing, right? We're actually seeing oligarchy. We're seeing money in politics, et cetera, policies that are being bought out by corporations in order for politicians and law and policy to do what they want. And racist ideology serves that same purpose. Okay, that's how I see things. So, great analogy. How do we actually see this different? What happens in the NFL draft? Are we familiar with the NFL draft, y'all?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is a great analogy. I saw this the other day. Somebody was telling me about this analogy. In the NFL draft, who gets the first pick at the draft? You have all these college students, right? Top of their class. You're trying to build the best teams possible. There's 32 NFL teams. What NFL team gets the first pick?
I have an answer, but it might be wrong. Isn't it like
Okay, go ahead.
Of that
The worst team.
Okay.
The worst team in the league. The worst team in the league the prior year, unless they traded it away in a prior year, right? Gets the pick of the best talent from all of college football. Think about that, okay? We're trying to build equality amongst each team so that there's actual competition, so that we're actually getting the best product possible, right? So that we're actually serving whatever purpose is actually there. That is what it looks like to imagine a different system. Who is struggling the most? Who is in need of access to particular systems in order to contribute well? And we have to define what contribution means. Like, it's not about how much I work. It's about developing all of the capacities I have as a human. So this is also a philosophical shift that we have to come away from, that I'm not just in service to commodity. I'm not just in service to capital, but I'm actually in service to my own development and the development of all humans according to their capacities, which then in turn means right relationship with the earth. We can address things like climate change, which is predominantly affecting those who are the most marginalized fiscally anyways.
Yeah. I love that analogy because it's spot on in the idea that the person struggling the most needs those resources the most so that it could put the level playing field. But here is the key with all of that. If I am in the top, why would I want to? And that in and of itself is why we have the gap. That is why we are where we are, because not enough people who are in the higher level, who are controllers of the power, controllers of the funds, not enough of them have made a stern commitment and investment to it changing, because they don't have to.
Because they don't have to, and because they don't have a larger vision beyond the material consumption of goods.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is what I mean by a philosophical shift. We have to ask deeper questions of what it means to be a living being on the planet. So I fundamentally ask these questions in my classrooms and the work that I do. The fundamental question is what does it mean to be human? Right. And so if we have a narrow view of what it means to be human, then I'm a cog in the wheel to work a machine in order for the majority. Okay, just plain and simple. As a employee, I have to be giving my employer more value than what I'm worth. So inherently, the system is built to make sure that the employee is never receiving the fullness of what they're worth, because they have to provide access to higher and higher levels of employment, right? If all that is the vision of being a human is this, then all that we're going to create systems for is to serve that purpose. And so we have to have a larger philosophical understanding of what it means to be human. What does it mean to be in right relationship? What does it mean to develop all of our capacities to their fullest flourishing potential?
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to ask one last question. That question being, what innovative programs are helping to close this gap?
I think.
Oh, go ahead.
London, I'd actually love to hear more about what you were sharing before we started here, which is the organization that you're a part of and just even the subtle ways that some businesses are trying to be creative with the ways that they're elevating people of color.
Definitely. So, like I mentioned before, I work for PricewaterhouseCoopers. It is an accounting firm. It is one of the big four accounting firms. And during my process while I was in college interning, the company stood out a lot to me. First being, I heard about, the fact that this company has several different clubs: women in tech, women in finance, also the BIN Network, Black Inclusion Network. And I was actually invited to a BIN Network lunch one day during my internship. I met a lot of Black people in like higher positions, directors, partners, other people like me who were just interns, and it felt really good. And that's the best way I can describe it. It just felt really good. I felt welcome, different than the other company that I had interned with before. It wasn't bad or anything, but I just felt very included, and they continued to show this type of inclusivity even once I've got hired. So like back in December, just this past month, they flew out literally all Black and Latino employees, like the new hires for this year, to Orlando. We stayed in Disney, and they rented out University for us. We were there for a weekend. We had a ball. It was very educational. I met everyone that was on the panels. They were all Black people or Latino people, and they had high positions at this big company that, in my mind, before I just would have never thought. I just thought, of course, it's all white men who are the partners. Just that's just what we typically see, right? So when I saw young Black women who were directors, but they've been with the company for just 10 years. And I was like, that's very inspirational. And I think, that's something that, some companies are going to choose to do in order to bring in, that diversity of minds, having that, type of diversity. Everyone's thinking a little bit different. You bring more to the company. I think more companies are going to try to do things like that, but also not all companies are doing things like that. So, but that's something I do appreciate about the company I work for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I really like that because ERG groups, groups like you're talking about, clubs, organizations in corporate America, in government, in private sector, in nonprofits, when they seek to cultivate their talent will give, right? And when you welcome diversity of thought, diversity of opinion, diversity of conversation, it enhances your organization. It just makes it better because I may not have thought something in one way, but bringing in another perspective is going to allow me many different options. So I love that your organization is doing that.
Me too. I'm a little proud.
As you should be.
Okay. All right. Well, that wraps this session up. Thank you, Aunt Tanya and Kyle. Could you guys both share with us any personal and professional? Oh, we got one more comment. Want to go, Aunt Tanya?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Comment. Oh, okay. Thank you, Aunt Deborah. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I would also just very briefly add that there are plenty of organizations that are doing this work, from advocacy and people who are accomplices in this work. The National African American Reparations Commission is doing a lot of work to try to push for policies that address these gaps. There's hospital networks, there's state and local policies that are allowing for access to these systems and trying to repair the damage that has been done in these ways too. So the work is being done. There's a lot of backlash right now. A lot of people getting rid of their DEI programs and the like. But people, wherever there's oppression, there's resistance. So I'll leave it to that.
Thank you. Did you guys want to share anything? Any aspirations you guys have upcoming, whether it's personal or professional?
Excellent. I'll end since mine is going to be a plug for Roots of Justice.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I continue to do this work with Roots of Justice and do my own mentorship work, especially with white folk in healing internalized racial superiority. So you can reach out to me. My LinkedIn is down there. You can also email me at the email listed there too. And I'll be on another Roots of Justice training soon, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And for me, you've seen our website scrolling down. Check us out at rootsofjusticetraining.org. As I told you, working as the director, I help to coordinate the trainings that we do. And we do offer anti-racist, anti-oppression training. We also offer trainings for white leaders. So you have that caucus group of just white leaders where we have our trainers come and really get some good conversations as to how to develop, as well as we have a BIPOC training that is specifically for Black, Indigenous, people of color, people of the global majority to really have that caucusing opportunity. So stay in touch with Roots of Justice. Opportunities like these only begin the conversation. There's also work to be done.
All right. Thank you to both of our panelists, Kyle Sullivan and Miss Tanya Fewell. Please feel free to connect with me via my LinkedIn. And we will now close out with a video.
That's all for today's conversation on Racism is Real. Thank you to our incredible guests for sharing their insights, and thank you for tuning in. Remember, awareness is the first step, but action is where the change happens. If you found today's discussion valuable, this series will return every second Tuesday evening. Also, be sure to check out our website and follow us for more information and topics like these. And consider making a donation to support our work. Together, we can challenge systems of oppression and work toward a more just future. See you next time.